This is the ThinkData Podcast in partnership with DataWorks. And today I'm pleased to welcome Saeed Ouissal to the show. Saeed is the co-founder and CEO of ZEDEDA, who are a cloud-native SaaS-based edge orchestration platform. Saeed has a really interesting background, really kind of a more kind of classic networking and telecoms experience, which has seen him lead teams in various companies, including Juniper Networks, Violin Memory, and Ericsson. You guys have obviously had huge growth over the last couple of years, and obviously really good to kind of get you on. I'm excited to talk about this kind of edge orchestration, edge computing. It's everyone talks about it in the same vein as kind of AI at the moment. So do you mind kind of bringing us up to speed with your background and what led you to launch ZEDEDA?
Sure, Alex. And thank you for having me on the show today on the podcast. Really excited to be here.
Pleasure.
Yeah. So as you said, we are very focused on the edge computing market. And in particularly, we provide large enterprises an edge orchestration service, SaaS product. And the reason we started with ZEDEDA, it's kind of interesting. It's been a few things that came together in our head as we sort of saw the market back about 6-7 years ago, two trends coming together that would really create this new era of edge computing. And the first one obviously was cloud computing, where it was very clear to us that, any application that will be built moving forward will be built in cloud native ways. So, people with cloud computing always talk about the utility model and you only pay for what you use, sort of rent the resources, the compute storage. But it really changed also how we build applications. And it was very clear for us then that anybody that was building any application, and particularly to analyze or process data, they would be building it in cloud native ways, because that's just the way to do it. And any app will, that's not running on an iPhone or whatever PC would be, therefore, all assuming it will run in a cloud environment. The other trend we saw happening, which is close to my background you just mentioned, was the Internet of Things, or IoT. And you've been talking about IoT for many years. It's nothing new. I think already when I started working and building out the early days of the internet back in the late 90s, early 2000s, already then we were talking about more and more devices will get connected to the network. And what we saw was really that it started going faster and faster at that time, in particular in enterprise and in industrial environments. People were hooking up machines and plants and cars and anything is getting connected to the network. And at that time, there was sort of okay, there's a lot of data being generated from these things that needs to be analyzed and processed using software. So either you're going to upload all that data to the cloud, all the video feeds, all that sensor data straight to the cloud, where that application will make sense of it and it will have more and more AI in it. That was also something we early on saw that was going to happen. Or that application needs to be pushed out and running close to the edge of the network. And we said that's going to happen because you can't upload all that raw information straight to the cloud. It's just too much data. Our network's actually not built for uploading data. We built them for downloading TikTok videos, but not uploading machine data to the cloud. And that's really how we define edge computing, is people are going to need the ability to deploy cloud native apps outside of the traditional cloud at the edge of the network. And, in order to do that, you need a way to orchestrate and deploy those apps. And that's what we do here at ZEDEDA.
It's interesting. I know you touched kind of off camera about your kind of background as well. So originally from Holland, you obviously working there. When did that I'm always interested on kind of the backstory of founders, because whether it's a chance encounter or is that kind of eureka moment. When did the idea come about? And obviously I know you touched on the fact you obviously Ericsson, Juniper, Violin, some really well-known businesses there. But when did you have that idea, and how did that kind of founding team, because there's a few co-founders, how did that all come together?
Yeah. Well, I would say number one is I've always spent since the 90s, my year and career on the internet. So in the early days, this was before always on. We had dial-up internet. So I actually was responsible for dial-ups farms at large service providers. In those days we were also very busy connecting continents. So we would lease fiber and basically connect the US, Europe, internet exchanges, those kind of things. But for my career, it's sort of been a progression we went from connecting continents. Then at Redback Ericsson, we were very busy with connecting homes. This was the ADSL, and everybody was kind of going.
Yeah, I remember.
Always on the internet. Do you remember? Yeah. No more beeping sounds from your modem when you dial up, and it was faster too. And then it was interesting at Ericsson. We sort of did the whole mobile broadband rollout. We became part of Ericsson. Ericsson was leveraging our technology to build sort of their 4G products, both the radio and the core. And this is where we sort of saw what happened when you brought internet to your pocket through the mobile smartphone revolution, which was incredible in those days. I mean, it was just exploding. Of course, the ecosystem had reached the right level. Applications were available, devices, all of that happened at the right time. And at Juniper, I spent a lot of time also on cloud computing. And in those days, the cloud data centers were being built out by the large cloud companies, and Juniper was partnered with some of them as part of their rollout. So I sort of saw the evolution of the internet. So this was a very logical next step. I don't think this was like, it was just like extrapolating from where we started and where the internet was going. To me, this made lots of sense. And, the next big thing is edge computing after we've seen sort of the cloud computing and the mobile computing era and the personal computing era. So that's kind of how the idea came about, or the hunch to look in that part of the stack, in that part of the market. But then, to your other point, which is actually really interesting, is like, well, how do you build a team and how do you figure out what people you need? And it was very clear for us there were a few things we need. Obviously, it's all about cloud computing. So we need people that understand cloud computing, cloud native applications, development methods. But there's also networking included because you're at the edge of the network. So we needed people that come with strong networking backgrounds like myself. Then we also identified that security was going to be paramount. And frankly, it's one of the biggest things with all our customers is they care a lot about security. And it's not just the network security, but also physically, these nodes are sitting in insecure nodes, environments. How do you prevent them to be hacked, physically tampered with? And we also realized that, an open architecture was going to be essential. So we actually heavily betted on open source and kind of open standards around what we were trying to do as well. So if you look at my, co-founders and the founding team, they came all with these type of backgrounds, which is kind of cool.
Interesting. Yeah. So you obviously had those kind of subject matter experts at that founder level. So I'm interested to touch, obviously, as mentioned, my kind of day job is building teams for companies like yourselves. And one of the big issues founders have is kind of passing the baton to the next level of people to come with their own ideas. I'm interested to kind of discuss that kind of ability to scale a team, because I know you've got a global presence. I know you're headquartered in the US and California, but talk to me about that kind of next level of building and, i.e. when you knew you had to hire, how did you hire? And were you typically trying to hire in your own in your own model, or were you just thinking, actually, I want people to come with their own ideas?
Yeah, that's a great question. So part of my background is I spent about half of my career in product management, meaning your job as a product manager is to, identify a customer need, right? And then, solve that need by building the right product. And in many cases, like in this particular case, we felt it was a need that customers themselves didn't fully understand yet as well, because edge computing was pretty early in the days when we started with it. So what I learned early on, in order to, do the best possible product management job was you have to listen to your customers really carefully.
Yeah.
So the first few years of ZEDEDA, we actually were not as busy with building product as we were actually very busy to understand and learn the customer needs. And so we spent a lot of time, like for instance, we went early on to talk to industrial companies and energy companies because we thought, well, those are the ones that are probably going to have the biggest need around edge computing. And then we started asking them a lot of questions like, well, what kind of software do you run today in these environments? How are you today analyzing data? It's not like they don't have data analytics and SCADA systems. In the DA and SCADA stands for data acquisition. Yep. So they've been acquiring data for a long time. But then we realized they wanted more data. They wanted more real-time data, and they wanted to be able to make faster decisions. And so all of that led to us understanding over time more and more really what the need was, and therefore what would be the right products that we would have to build. And then once you have that understood and you kind of have a good idea about the product requirements and the product capabilities, then it becomes a matching of skills. Like, okay, well, what kind of skills do we need? Where can we find these skills? And again, I think we started with the right DNA strands that I mentioned earlier, that open source security, networking, and cloud native. And then I think with good customer listening, we were able to build a great and amazing team. And I think the other thing I noticed is as you kind of recruit then people to come in and join you on the mission, when they notice that you've actually done a lot of your homework and you kind of have really good use cases in mind, good customer names, good problems to solve, people get even more excited and really often, much quicker come on in and join and help.
Yeah, it's perpetual emotion, isn't it? People get excited and throw good people know good people. And I think it's interesting you touch on a product background. I see a lot of kind of successful founders who have come from that more commercial product line because they commercialize product entities. They know how to build a product roadmap. But on the flip side, there's a lot of organizations that just fail to nail their go-to-market strategy. You know, the amount of people we speak to who have moved on from roles because product market fit's not defined and the go-to-market strategy is still being worked out on the fly. What is, as much as you can tell me, what is your go-to-market strategy and how has that kind of ebbed and flowed over the years in terms of what you thought you were going to be doing and selling versus what you ended up selling?
Yeah. So they were, in order to, before you can have product market fit, you have to first understand the market. And in particular, you have to understand who are the most likely people or customers that will need your product.
Yeah.
And there were three things that, kind of were top of mind for me. Number one is, we're talking about running cloud native applications, Kubernetes, Docker-based applications outside of the data center and cloud inside a well site or in a truck or in a factory, right? So number one is, as a customer, we said you have to be cloud mature. Like you have to be very adapted in cloud technology. You should be using cloud technologies already today as an enterprise. The second piece that we was very clear for us is, the importance of being data driven. Like the organization needs to have this natural hungriness for data out of every asset, every part of the business, so they can improve their decision-making process faster, better decisions. And the last thing, which was very clear for us, is you need to be quite, you need to have a lot of distributed locations or assets where your business is conducted. Because that's kind of a part of that edge computing is you got a lot of sites, a lot of places where data is being generated, and you can't upload the data to the cloud. So therefore you push the application to the edge. And so that's kind of what we started with. Then we started looking at what verticals would be prone to this. And actually oil and gas was, for instance, and renewable energy were markets we early on said, well, that kind of fits a lot here. Like these companies typically have data driven, very cloud mature, obviously very distributed operations. So some of our first customers were actually in the energy space. And that sort of then validated, okay, we got at least one market that needs our product. Yeah. And then we kept adding more and more. And we have about 9-10 verticals nowadays that we're deployed in, ranging from running on container shipping vessels today in the middle of the ocean, running in solar farms, running in well sites. We're running in stores. Retailers are using our product. We're being used in manufacturing, like both in process and discrete. We are powering in automotive use cases as well. So we've really now seen sort of, okay, these are all different markets, yet they have sort of the same problem. As soon as they need to deploy these applications out there, they need something like what we build in order to accomplish that.
It's very interesting, isn't it? Kind of you go into one market and territory, then you start to see an affiliated market, and then it's easy when you've got one case study, you start to land and expand. Have you is it quite a proactive outreach model in terms of your classic kind of sales structure, or are you quite events heavy? Are you quite, how do you work through the channel at all? How do things work from that standpoint?
Yeah, that's a great question. So we work directly with our customers. So, and we are focused on some of we focus typically on very large Fortune 500, Fortune 2000 enterprises. Yeah. That's sort of been our go-to-market from the early on, because we believe, and we've been validated, it's like the more locations you are generating data, the more you need a product like us. So for us, it's kind of clear. Let's go to the bigger ones and see if we could partner with them. Now, obviously, when you work with some of these very large enterprises, you're more used to buying from large vendors. So as a startup, you actually have to work even harder to convince them that you can serve their needs, that you're going to be around long enough to support them, that you can invest, the resources and everything else. And interesting with ZEDEDA has been that actually a lot of these customers ended up investing in our company through our different fundraising, which when we kind of, started realizing there was a lot of interest, they were like, well, we believe this is going to be strategic to us. And therefore we want to support the company, want to invest, want to build a close relationship with you. And we think this is a good investment on top of that. So, where we have folks like Chevron is an investor, Porsche Ventures is an investor, Emerson, Rockwell, EDF, one of the large utilities in the world. They're all investors in the company. And I think that's been all sort of, I think, further supporting that this is, even though it's still, I would say, early days in the market, it is really happening. And this is strategic to those folks. At the same time, every deployment we have is multiple vendors. It's not just us. We provide a part of the solution. There's hardware needed, there's applications needed, there's system integration needed, there's cloud needed, there's networking needed. So in every project, there's at least 4 or 5 different vendors that have to work together to deliver an edge computing deployment. So we had to also early on learn how to work with all these partners in a good way, and like how can we together go faster and accomplish the customers' timelines and solve their needs and everything else. So we do work closely with partners, but not necessarily as a channel, but more as an ecosystem any integrations and things like that. But at the end, we work directly with some of these very large enterprise out there that I mentioned earlier.
It's very interesting. It's actually one of the only times I've heard of actually customers who, it's only some of the brands you referenced there, who are actually being so interested that they want to take a strategic partnership and investment. And I suppose that does its own selling for you, I guess, when you're going to those new prospects and saying, actually, this is who else we've got on board. It's probably a harder question to answer, but if you had your time again approaching the go-to-market strategy, is there anything you would have changed, or have you always been quite clear and comfortable and happy with the way you've gone?
Well, I mean, listen, it's always easier in hindsight to say, I wish I could have invested more, hired more people. I think we've done pretty well. I would say, the market is also still relatively early. And it takes time to design these solutions. It takes time to implement them, roll them out. Typically our customers, especially if it's a large, like one of the largest automotive companies in the world, has deployed us in all their service centers and dealers as part of the solution to, the software stack needed to diagnose vehicles when they get dropped off. You imagine rolling out in 130 countries or more. And, in every country, there's all these service centers and dealers that you have to deploy in. It just takes time. It's not something you can just quickly do. So sometimes rollouts can take a year or two. But that also means once you're in for a long-term partnership with these customers as well. So I would say, we can always improve. There's always areas we could do better, but I feel like we've done well in terms of first focusing on a few verticals, go deep in that, establish the product, establish the brand, and then keep adding more and more verticals. And through the process, some of these folks becoming also investors, kind of continue to grow more and more awareness of who we are, what we do, and why we have a great fit for these orchestration needs the customers have.
No, I like that. There's lots to be said for knowing your product and, backing it and knowing it's needed. And then just, as you say, getting really deep into these verticals where you are starting to own these entire operations and becoming one of those 3 or 4 vendors that are absolutely critical to their operations. And you touched on it at the beginning, and you mentioned it just now in terms of AI, and it wouldn't be this kind of podcast without talking about that. A lot of organizations have got they've got so much data, but they're not making use of it. And obviously, when you take IoT, and on your point at the beginning, it's been around for a while in terms of this connected technologies. Certainly, if you look at Industry 4.0 and that kind of industrialization side of things. But how big a part has AI played in terms of the rate at which IO technology has progressed? And specifically, if you look at, say, energy, for example, where I know you're pretty big in, how important and how critical is AI been in that evolution?
Yeah. That's a great question. So, I mean, we are in the data analytics business. Yeah. The way I think about it, edge computing is a cost-efficient way of processing large amounts of data in real time in high number of locations, right? Yep. That's the way to think about edge computing. And of course, you can write the software yourself that will make sense of the data. But increasingly, we have seen over the last few years that customers are using more and more AI models to help find patterns and behaviors. And we have several customers who've been using us to deploy AI models at the edge already for a few years. And what they typically do is they deploy hardware, servers, or edge compute node, industrial computers that have multiple GPUs. And often one of those GPUs then is assigned to do accelerated computing and help with predictive AI, vision AI. It's not been that much of generative AI yet, but I think there will be more of that. We're seeing definitely customers rethinking the human machine interface. Instead of a touch screen, you can kind of talk to a machine or system. Yeah. In a conversational way. And then I think the next big thing is physical AI. And if you've seen sort of what's going on right now with robotics and autonomous systems, that's all sort of part of the physical AI movement. So we think AI is almost going to become like the killer app for edge computing, and that more and more of the software stack that's going to be deployed on these edge compute nodes will be heavily, AI driven and everything else. We actually just recently announced expanding our product to run on the Jetson hardware from NVIDIA, which is kind of the smaller GPU form factors. And we have several customers that, are either evaluating that or doing that. And so that's kind of an interesting where we're seeing sort of more and more compute being deployed in the field that is capable of running AI models. And what we do obviously is integrate with whatever platform used for training and sort of developing those AI models and then being a conduit to the edge, pulling those models and pushing them out to the different edge nodes.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think everyone's is investing in some form of another with artificial intelligence technology. But you're right, kind of the sheer volume of data that's being generated that you touched on kind of manufacturing. And, you can only imagine with those 120 dealer sites and service centers, the amount of data that's needing to be harnessed, and you just can't deploy those applications unless you're using Edge. So I think that's, it's really interesting. And I'm interested to always touch on kind of some of the success stories across the journey of where you and your co-founders sit there and think, that's nice to hear, or it's a great case study. What's the one that stands out?
Yeah, there's many, and that's the interesting thing also about our the way we work with our customers. We're usually not seen as an IT tool that you kind of sell to the IT department only. IT is heavily involved in everything we do, but we're usually working in tandem with the line of business, or what people call OT, right? So we're working very closely with the businesses that are responsible for drilling wells, for instance, at organizations that, like oil and gas field services companies, right? So you learn a lot about what does that mean, drilling a well, and you can you can think of, you can imagine how it is, but then they tell you what it is, and that's not always the same. It's actually a lot more, detailed and a lot more interesting. But that's one example. Like we're used by customers to drill. They use the compute for drilling wells and accurate drill wells and fast enough, and they use edge computing and the data as part of that. I told you earlier about the automotive customer. We have today, 10,000s of mechanics around the world that are using a solution deployed in that we power for this customer and all of these dealers to, update vehicle software, read out information from the vehicle. So we're like in their, after sales business, basically the entire software stack needed to do that. And another exciting customer is one of the large container shipping companies. We're running on the actual vessel itself in the middle of the ocean, powering basically the IoT stack, which includes, getting data out of the containers that are on the ship, tracking, cargo, providing networking on the ship, like private wireless network. So that's all part of sort of this edge computing architecture that they standardize on us. So these are really cool use cases. We kind of really see how, our technology makes a big impact to these customers and allows them to be more competitive, offer better services to their customers, superior customer experience to their customers, reduce costs. So it's kind of cool.
And you can't really, now it's deployed, you can't really imagine a life without edge computing and the technology that you've got. Can you imagine those organizations or those shipping vessels or not having it? It'd be like going back 10 steps, wouldn't it? So I suppose now you're in, it's about kind of expanding and landing, kind of more customers, but also, and this kind of final question for you is, what's the journey now of the next 6-12 months? Because obviously you're in these organizations, you're in some of these really interesting, super hyper niche use cases. So where do you see the business and maybe the product evolving over the next 6-12 months?
Yeah. Well, a couple of things. I mean, I think first of all, we in many of these customers, we usually start with one use case.
Yeah.
But what we typically see is like, especially when I have different lines of businesses, we quickly start like spreading into the organization. And over time, the customers basically understand that what we give them is a platform for edge computing, not just the one use case, but a common architecture, which helps them because now their developers and their partners don't have to worry about like, how do I get the software running in these environments? How do I secure it? How do I deploy? How do I monitor it? We solve all of that, even though these are all very different verticals and very different use cases. The feature set we deliver to each of these customers is exactly the same. So that's kind of number one. That's interesting. And, the best compliments I always get is when I have a customer. We had recently a customer meeting, one of our earlier customers, and they have now 5 different groups using our product. And they go like, well, Azure is our cloud platform and ZEDEDA is our edge platform, right? And I think that's how important and relevant we become for these folks, which means we're not just niche. We're basically the underlying operating system for all the software that runs outside of a data center or cloud, which I think is great if you can build that relationship and trust to an account to do that. Now, where things are going, I would say is definitely number one is AI. I would say what's happened. Obviously, we're sort of in the hype of AI right now, and almost like every problem, the solution seems to be AI, some word AI included in the sentence.
Yeah.
But I think regardless of how you feel about the current market and the hype around it, it has really accelerated AI as an industry and technologies for AI. And I think a lot more money's pouring in investment-wise. That's sort of driving new ideas. So that's actually really good to see happening, where the innovation rate on AI is exploding. And now it's really people are trying to apply it more and more, and not just in the browser, but also in a machine or in a factory or whatever else, which I think is just phenomenal to see.
Yeah.
So AI will continue to become bigger. The other trend that we're seeing is, you can't have edge computing if it's not connected to a cloud. Because think about it, at the end, you're processing data locally, you make sense of the data, but you send the output of that to a cloud or to a data center. So connectivity is key. You have to connect to these sites and locations. And I think the work that's been going on around the space, as I call it, the space race, where you have folks like Starlink and OneWeb and Kuiper, and everybody's sort of building now these new satellite constellation networks that are dramatically bringing down the cost of connectivity. That's just amazing. We just, recently signed a big partnership with one of Starlink's largest enterprise partners. And, the demand for Starlink is just off the charts, as an example. We're seeing that as well.
Isn't it? Yeah.
So that connectivity now, we solved a really big problem about how do we get connectivity across the globe and not just in a couple of parts of the globe. And I think that's really amazing to sort of see that second trend. And I think the third trend that, we're super excited about and generally is that, people really starting to understand that, the traditional cloud model where you just had a couple of data centers that serve the whole region or whatever else, it's really getting more and more distributed. And that's a function of that we need to distribute our compute power. Electricity is not easy. It's getting harder to find. So you have to start thinking about it. You just look at companies like CoreWeave and others that sort of came out of nowhere, now building all over their country and in the world data centers. So it's really building out that cloud computing and a network are becoming more and more one, which I think is really cool to see.
It's exciting. Yeah, I love the space you guys are in. And obviously, no surprise you've had the growth that you have. I think the backstory, kind of the idea and how it's evolved to, and the use cases you're talking about now is people listening to this. I'm assuming on your website, is there examples of some of the case studies? And maybe people can take a closer look at that if they're just curious to hear what you guys do.
Yeah. We've got a lot of material on the website. You can try out the product. We have like self-service capability. It's a SaaS product. You can just sign up with your email, get access, very easily get up and running. And of course, if you're interested to learn more, always, there's a nice big contact us button on the website, and just reach out to us, and we're happy to kind of go into a bit more detail. And I would say the other thing, and maybe interesting, is just take our partners. Like, we've got some amazing partners. We have a equivalent of an app store, you can call it, like just the mobile phone at its app store. We call it a marketplace. But every time we onboard an application of a partner, that means that, everybody else using our product can deploy that same application. And that's how we're thinking about edge computing. It down the line needs to be as simple and as easy as using either a mobile phone or using a cloud. Like, that's really our vision about where edge computing needs to go. And that's what we try every day to, make progress on is making it super effortless, as we call it, to do edge computing, yet still very secure.
Yeah, I've got no doubt you guys will have huge successes. And thanks, Saeed, for coming on this afternoon. It's been, a lot of fun and really super interesting. I think it's, as you dig more into this space, I think so much more comes out of it. And as you said there on the final point, it's so valid. There's so much more capacity and capability here. So no, thanks so much. It's been my pleasure to have you on.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Alex, and appreciate it. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thanks very much.